Hi, everyone. I'm Sava Marikovic, and welcome to another episode of HTEC Today. Today, we're diving into a topic that's rapidly reshaping the retail landscape, the role of computer vision in physical stores and how it's transforming them into really intelligent, data-driven environments. I'm joined today by Joe Serrano, Senior Retail Consultant at HTEC, and our Senior HTEC Advisor in Retail, Arnon Kraft. And together, we'll be discussing where computer vision is really driving business impact, what's still hype, what are some of the main implementation challenges, and then what retailers are doing to scale successfully. So let's get started. So with that, retail, as many people know, is becoming increasingly intelligent and data-driven. It's always been that way online, and now it's moving into the physical store space. And while AI has long driven like recommendations and forecasting and optimization on the digital side, it's computer vision that's now bringing a similar level of insight to the store floor. So to my guests today, I want to just open up and ask about, do you think physical retail is catching up with e-commerce? Is it caught up? Is it different? So let me start that off with Joe.
Well, I mean, physical retail, I think we've gone through these platform shifts before, right? Everybody thought that physical retail was going to be put out of business when the internet came around. That certainly did not happen. How many years ago did Amazon Go also announce their first store, that they were going to roll out thousands of these stores, and now they've backed off from that. That was going to be heavily driven by, cameras and just walk out technology. That shifted a little bit, but I think stores are always going to be a part of it. I think we're hunters and gatherers at heart, and it's the social piece of it. In addition to, you can have as much agentic commerce trying to help you curate what you're going to buy, but ultimately you're going to want to go to the store for having it more quickly, to be able to discover what's new. So I think it's got the physical store is going to be surviving a long time. 80% of sales are still happening in a physical store versus e-commerce.
That's a great point. On Amazon's topic, they removed their just walkout technology, right? I think in 2024. So, I mean, is that a pullback, or is that kind of like that? Was that a test that didn't work well? Like what? How do we interpret Amazon's kind of, some people are calling it a retreat?
Yeah, I mean, I'll take first of that, and then maybe Arnon, you've got some thoughts on that too. But certainly, what I love about Amazon is they test and learn, and they'll even test competing concepts at the same time. This test, they probably got a lot of learnings from it. I think they're still selling just walkout technology itself. Maybe they've backed off from the actual Amazon Go stores. They've announced they're opening up an entire big box location that's going to be bigger than maybe even a Walmart, I understand, in 2027 in Chicago. So are they going to take some of what they learned and put it in the big box store? My guess is going to be, probably will be testing some of that in store. I'm sure it's going to have a heavy duty dose of computer vision based on what I'm seeing in the industry and why we're going to do that. And I think there's a lot of advantages of that, not just for Amazon, but any other store that is looking at moving into the AI space. But I think Amazon has got some learnings from it. They're shutting down what doesn't work, and they're going to make it evolve into what is going to work. And I think that's what I like about Amazon.
Thanks, Joe. Arnon, what do you think?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think that just the fact that people call it, failure because they're pulling back, to me is missing the point. They were the first to launch self-checkout stores with Amazon Go. And I can only imagine the learnings they had from that. And they're not the only ones, right? I think even as early as late 2023, there was an article by Professor Arnon from Wharton University. He talks about how Walmart is pulling back self-checkout. And I think those experiments, and I love the term experiments, when you experiment with new technology, I think by definition, by design, you can argue which percentage, but a substantial percentage of those experiments not to work out from the get-go, and pulling back and reshaping what that solution looks like and how to use it, I think is incredible, and the value of it is going to be incredible for them. And I think retail is at an inflection point. It's not the only industry, obviously, right now with everything going on with AI that's at an inflection point. But for years, we have treated, physical stores like a black box. We knew what was sold, but nobody really had any idea what actually happens inside those four walls. Computer vision changes that, not just at the point of sale in terms of self-checkout. It really turns the store from a blind spot that it used to be in the past into a data engine, and data is the name of the game. But I think the challenging, or I would even say uncomfortable part, is that visibility alone, seeing what's happening, doesn't create value or enough value. So if computer vision is just more cameras and dashboards that nobody is looking at, we're missing the point. The real opportunity, and it's not free of challenge, but it's an opportunity, is how do you turn that vision into action? How do you, we can talk about it later in more depth. How do you reduce shrink? How do you eliminate friction? Fundamentally, how do you change, how the physical retail store operates? And I think that's the connection that is needed between the data to actually operationalizing the actions to actually do with that data.
That's super interesting. I think I'd like to unpack a couple of these things, but the first one is Amazon was first in the space. How much is it valuable to be first in the space versus a fast follower? Like, where do you innovate on these? I mean, how do you consider being the first to apply things, or is there enough low-hanging fruit to just adopt in a retail setting?
Yeah, the technology is always changing, and I think it's moving quickly. If you actually look at the history of where AI itself started having the biggest breakthroughs, it actually was computer vision. To move from like a 40% accuracy to 91% accuracy of what it's identifying with a high level of confidence is sort of where AI sort of had its first sort of sets of breakthroughs. And I think you can actually use that as maybe a good rubric as you're looking at how am I going to use AI and writ large as a retailer itself. I always like the maturity model of autonomous driving. You got your level one's always the level 5. Level 1 is like, what are we doing just to collect data itself and have it in a usable fashion, all the way to level 5 might be a fully autonomous store that's doing autonomous replenishment. It's doing predictive allocations. It's looking end to end throughout your entire store and being the eyes of it, just as computer vision is for autonomous driving vehicles. It's not going to be unlike that. It's a little behind autonomous driving vehicles, but I think it's a good place to start. And again, data is going to be the biggest piece of that. But I think one of the biggest bottlenecks is probably going to be just what kind of cameras do you have. You could probably retrofit or use your existing cameras 40% of the time based on what I've seen out there in the industry, and you might have to retrofit some of those to get it to a point where it's more usable and you have the clarity, you have the maybe it's an edge network or you're doing it on-prem in some fashion to make the action layer possible. But I think we're really moving into a time now where we can use what's existing a lot more technologies are making that possible. So I think computer vision, just building the foundations for that for your store, start you down the path of like a good place to start in AI in a lot of different ways for retailers, in my opinion.
Yeah, really interesting. And having a maturity model that for you to compare yourself, where are you in the industry, is probably extremely useful.
Yeah, and just to add on that, maybe I don't know that it matters that much who's first and who's not. There's obviously advantage in being first, and you get to run through the learnings faster, or at least before anybody else. But then there's also an advantage of seeing what somebody else is doing, and then building that experiment in a different way. I think I can argue both cases if it's the right thing to be first or not. But what I think is more important is the understanding that there's a difference. And any time when you introduce a new technology, there's a difference between what's happening in the lab in very secure, comfortable four walls and what's happening in real life. And I think especially in retail, where stores are, it's a mess. It's really everything between the people who are working, the patrons, the clients, and the people who work and putting product not on the right shelf. It's really mayhem of sorts. And I think making sure that the understanding you have in the lab, how do you translate that into real life, for me is key. And I don't know that I think that physical retail is lagging anymore. Obviously, it did, but I think it's evolving a different type of intelligence. Let's call it. Obviously, e-commerce, we know, had very structured, clean data from the start. That's the whole point of e-commerce. But stores, I think, and to Joe's point, years ago, the hardware part of it, which camera do you have, which was also, a gating. Do I want to make the investment and put all these cameras in stores? It's a big investment on CapEx. And that was the gating to get some data. I think today, with the advancement of the edge devices, stores are finally gaining that visibility into physical actions because the hardware side of it is good enough. And that's really all it takes, just to be good enough. And then the AI piece on top of these cameras is really where the value comes from.
Yeah, I think the AI on edge is one of the really most interesting value creators because of that legacy repurposing of cameras that you can put in, and your infrastructure costs your hardware infrastructure may not necessarily have to rise to meet that. So in terms of kind of real world cases, maybe we can take a few of these. Is there a big deal right now in security and loss prevention that hasn't been there before? I mean, is it more autonomous now? Is there a real kind of a step function up today, or is that still a big issue?
So look, I can kick this off. Obviously, I think if we think about the first thing when security and loss prevention, I think everybody expected self-checkout, as an example, to lower labor costs, right? You have self-checkout, you don't need cashiers. But in many cases, what it actually did, it increased the shrink, which made loss prevention, a business logic instead of an afterthought. And maybe self-checkout really cut the lines and the labor cost, but it also created other costs, or again, rephrasing it, loss vectors like, misscans and incorrect barcodes, and intentional or accidental theft at times. And I think when you think about computer vision and how it overlaps with self-checkout, you can really reduce the shrink and enhance the trust if you know how to deploy them in the stores in the right way. And if you use the headcount that you have in the stores in a different way than you did before, maybe not at checkout, but in a more accurate way of deployment of that headcount.
Shrink averages, I don't know, it's going to be somewhere between 1% to 1.5%. I think it has gone up, Arnon, like you said, after a lot of self-checkout started taking off. A lot of it's due to non-scans. Like sometimes it is unintentional when you particularly in grocery stores, like you're weighing a mango, right? Like, and sometimes it may not be correct, or somebody's putting in something a lot cheaper than a mango in there somehow, right, on purpose. So it's hard to know exactly why that is happening. So there's new behaviors that are happening, and shrink, if you can, particularly for grocers, if you can reduce shrink, I think the whole point of AI in a store is to increase your free cash flow. And you've got all these different data points coming from a lot of different places. Computer vision is going to be capturing a lot of those. And I think that's where, if you were actually to create a hierarchy of needs for computer vision in a store, I think shrink is probably the bottom one where you start with, and then you probably quickly move to inventory accuracy and replenishment from there. But I think shrink is definitely a great place to start.
I agree. The way to think about it is that self-checkout without vision is really automation without assurance. So again, you can do the automation and help self-checkout, but without the vision that ties into real time to operationalize the people in the store, you don't have assurance that what you're doing is the right thing. And I think that's exactly to your point, Joe, what stores realize, that it's just not good enough.
At a per store level, individual store level, aside from shrink, is there any other use cases that come in terms of the customer experience just by having that visual camera? Like, does it change the customer experience so that it not just affects the cost side, but helps on the revenue side?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. I was moving there after the shrink conversation. I think it gets into on-shelf availability. Every store struggles with that today. Like, we hear it all the time. And I mean, I'm here in Minneapolis, and we hear about it at Target all the time too, as being one of their biggest issues of what's slowing their growth. And I think that's a great way to look at it. But you start adding the predictive analytics to it too, and how that works then with vendor marketing, how that's going to work with the future of how agentic commerce works. Where I'll hit on that just briefly, which is there's really two reasons, or two ways that agentic commerce gets impacted here with computer vision in the store. Is there's going to be an intent-based visit, and then there's going to be a browsing-based visit. So today, the way that grocers, for example, have milk in the back, they think that obviously drives more sales because you have to walk through the whole store, and that creates more of that browsing visit. If you have an intent-based visit for milk, maybe that changes once we actually get smarter about what people are coming in for ahead of time. If it's tied to their loyalty program, it's tied to their app that they're coming into the store with. They can see where their dwell time is. They can see what they search for beforehand, and they have some level of prediction to maybe lay out a store differently. It might be really interesting to see what happens when we start actually having an action layer around computer vision in stores attached to the future of what agentic commerce means, or how predictive it can be in the future.
Yeah, and I think there's other ways that we can think about how to use computer vision. Just that notion of somebody seeing everything that's happening in the store, and again, obviously we covered self-checkout and the advantages and frustrations it can bring. But just think about a patron in the store looking for an item and can't find it, and you can track the motion and see that somebody's looking at shelves and takes and puts back items on the shelf. If we can send somebody to ask them what they're looking for and why they're frustrated and help, you're not leaving money on the table by having that customer walk out not finding what they came in to find and frustrated at that. And also, if you have somebody who's walking in the store and you see that they're picking up a number of items, and that X% of people who pick up pretzels and chips also buy beer, as an example, again, help direct them in that direction. I think there's so much that stores can do. And again, to the earlier point, turning stores from a black box of we have no idea what's happening to really understand what people are doing in the store, what they're looking for, where they face challenges or issues in the store, and then direct somebody, and maybe that somebody was a cashier before, but now let's direct that person into helping a specific customer at exactly the point in time where they need help.
Right. I mean, store as an agent, maybe that's what you can call it that, right? It becomes an agent itself. Even go so as far as to say, like, you've got planograms that are the same across all stores in the country. Maybe it becomes, hey, this store is actually acting on its own to know exactly what its localized customers really want in more real time, and have it be able to action on that a lot faster. Setting up new planograms, setting up new ways to sell, having different products in every store, maybe even if they're just across the river from each other, right? So this is what gives it the ability to do, and computer vision is going to be play a big role in that.
This sounds amazing, but how daunting is it for an enterprise to do? Is this something that could be started in small blocks, or does it really need to be this is the strategy in a retail setting? Like, where does it sit from the kind of the strategic mindset, and not just from a implementation perspective, but how do you create a differentiation in this when you're thinking at a strategic level? So pilots sound like a way to dip your toes in it and in the newest technologies, but how daunting is this, and how essential is it to do this today, to think this way, if you're in the competitive retail space? Arnon, maybe you want to?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, and again, this is something we talked about. Computer vision, like many things, is so much harder than it looks in the real world. And um, I think really the right way to phrase this is retail is really a pretty hostile environment for AI. I mean, we all talk about model accuracy and how important it is, but in practice, in reality, accuracy is really shaped by the store at the store and not in the lab. Little things from lighting changes and the shelves get messy and people are in front of cameras and blocking their view. Products that look almost identical, but not really, especially when you think about private labels in the stores. This is really where whatever system you have gets put to the test. And obviously, as anything with life, it's usually at exactly the worst moments that you wouldn't want to happen, whether it's holidays or promotions or peak traffic time or whatever it is. Again, not to belabor that point, but I think self-checkout was a great example. People expected it to be super simple on paper. It is, right? Scan the item, pay, move on, you're done. And in reality, it wasn't exactly like that. Again, barcodes can lie, as weird as that sounds. Weight checks fail sometimes when you had that mechanism in the stores. Again, customers make honest mistakes, not to mention fraud, and sometimes it is fraud. How do you differentiate and know what action to take? So I think if you have a system that takes or treats everything in the same way, that's a problem. And I think, retailers who really get ahead in how they treat, different SKUs onboarding and data updates, and again, an operational process, I think that to me is the key. It's not just a data science task or initiative. It's really an operational process. How do I take that data, understand when it's accurate and when it isn't, and then do a call to action in the store in live? I think that to me is key, and I think that's what people realize throughout the years. This is not just a technology play; it's an operations play, and that's exactly what they had to get done.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'd even go so far, Arnon, to say that this is table stakes at this point, right? Like if you're moving into this AI space, computer vision is going to have to be part of what you have in a physical environment. It's your eyes. It's your eyes for the entire store. And again, maybe I take it too far and say this is going to be, your agent that's going to optimize based on different rules you have for the day. Maybe you want to optimize for getting people in the store. It's going to recommend, where you place certain products. Having that inventory accuracy is going to be important. Having it at a local level is going to be important. But I think you have to start somewhere. Like I think you have to start tinkering with it. I always like that term, tinkering or experimenting with it, setting the foundations for it. And I think Arnon, you hit it right on the head. It's like there's too much data that retailers are having to deal with. So it's like, what do you do with it? How do you start creating those workflows that are going to show the actions that need to be taken? Because I think that, like you hit on that really early on too. Like this has to be the operational control layer, not just analytics, not another dashboard. I think,
Exactly.
yeah, store managers have how many dashboards already? They probably have 50 dashboards already. They probably have, who knows, tens of thousands of pieces of data. So it's really making the sense of where you're going to start. Shrink to start, do the inventory accuracy after that. Figure out what works best for you. I think that's the other thing too. It's not going to work best for every single retailer, so you're going to have to figure out what's best for you in your environment. And I think shrink is always a great place to start. For others, it might be inventory accuracy. Just making sure you're making replenishment work. Just really depends on what you're trying to drive for your specific use case.
Exactly.
Coming back to something you said, Arnon, which is if you doing these pilots helps you maybe get a competitive insight that gives you an advantage over your competitors. So when you're looking at this, and Joe, you're mentioning this is table stakes to come in, it's almost that you have to this kind of computer vision like element of retail is giving you insights into customers that helps you drive the strategy in terms of adapting strategy? Are there changes? Are there profile aspects? And then those are kind of competitive advantages. What do you see as being a longer term competitive advantage for a retail setting? So maybe this is, where does CV fit into this whole thing? Is it the data engine that becomes kind of like a core element? Is it just a part of another larger agentic system that kind of evaluates all these different, the equivalent of retail multimodal, where it's not just pure video or data or kind of, text or something, but all these different facets building into a more larger strategy and a refined strategy? Joe, what do you think?
I'll take that. Obviously, multimodal is very key, right? So this is, again, like, I love comparing it to autonomous driving vehicles. It starts with the site, but there's a lot of other things going on. Right? You got to drive the vehicle itself too. So what are all those elements that go into that? And I think you have to have a higher level of accuracy going in. So I think as accuracy gets better and better and better, as models get better and better and better, as agents get better and better and better, I think you're going to look at, hey, this is going to be a key part to driving your entire store. I think one of the things in particular that excites me is this retail media evolution. So how do we have monetization that it weakens when the shoppers arrive pre-committed? So that's going to happen. Maybe more, maybe not. I think there's lots of speculation on how that happens inside a store. It's more so around e-commerce today, but I think, how does agentic commerce work inside a store? Well, they're still going to have their app. They're still going to have omni-channel. They're still going to want to have things working from the same interfaces for your brand. So it helps. Computer vision will help enable performance verification with store influence based on their intent coming in, or what we perceive their intent coming in with. And that's a monetization play. That's a growth play. And then getting to what I was talking about before, then that also then informs, like, how do we rethink the store layout then? We've been so reliant on what's worked in the past, and maybe it stays the same. Maybe the milk stays in the back of the store, or maybe not. Maybe that changes. So I'm not sure how that plays out yet, but it will probably provide new insights that we can action on better. Obviously, how many tens of thousands of data inputs do we have today that the human mind currently on spreadsheets right now, and having 3-month, 6-month planning cycles gets compressed into maybe weekly cycles based on what we learn, including computer vision, including IoT, including some of these other pieces that we're learning about how employees work, how operations work, how picking in the back works for e-commerce all together. So computer vision will play a very key element across an entire value chain inside the store now and in the future. So get cracking now on tinkering with it and figuring out what works best for you now with one workflow.
Yeah, I actually, just to add on that, I love the verb, tinkering that Joe used, and I think that's exactly what it takes. I'm just, thinking back to a number of pilots that I've done with companies I consulted to in this space. And in one of them, they set out to test one thing, but the main output or insight they had from that pilot was that actually they tried to test whatever, but it was clear to them that the main issue that came up was trust. Actually, employees thought that this whole thing is about not trusting them, and this became a big deal. In a different case, again, they try to look at inventory and they build these amazing dashboards, only to find out, to Joe's earlier point, that the store managers have, 50 other dashboards, really nice with colors, but they're all, reactive. To look at them at the end of the day, that doesn't help much. So I think what really works for retailers who got computer vision right is just to start in a very small, let's even call it unglamorous space. Start with one place, one use case, one KPI, one clear action. Maybe it's shelf availability, maybe it's misscan detection, maybe it's planogram compliance, whatever it is, doesn't really matter. Just start with that, detect something, trigger an action. Otherwise, again, it's just another dashboard and a screen for somebody. Trigger an action and an outcome. And I think once that works, then you can start to layer more and more use cases and actions on the same camera infrastructure that you have in the store. And suddenly you see an ROI and you can have that conversation. So I think it's not a matter of let's try to swallow everything or boil the ocean at once. Let's start small with the infrastructure we have, but make sure that whatever KPI or parameter we're looking at, that we know how to tie into that into an actionable task we're going to make and to drive eventually to a positive ROI.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I love the idea of the stacking trust. I think that's what it is. What's the one thing you think you can trust the most using computer vision in a pilot, and then move from there? It becomes almost like the new UX with AI and computer vision. Trust, right? The trust layers. And to your point too, Arnon, I love this too. Like, dashboards don't make money, actions do. So it's got to move to an action. Otherwise, we're just going to have collecting more and more data, like they already have an overwhelming amount of, right, already. So yeah, really great points.
One kind of perspective is looking at it from what does this mean for brands that are going through a retail setting like a grocery store, in that are there opportunities for them in terms of understanding how to tailor their products or get a better relationship between, let's say, a grocery or a product kind of big box retailer and the brands that are sold within there? Is there any change in the dynamic because of this more kind of richer understanding of what's going on in the store?
Could be a few things going on there. Obviously, the large CPGs really own the shelf at grocers, for example, and to some cases, even when you go into department stores, there's a small collection of brands that really own the floor. Once you actually start getting real data, beyond the gut and beyond, hey, how much a vendor is providing in vendor-funded marketing, it might become really interesting. Like some of the space might become a lot more expensive from a vendor-funded marketing standpoint, or an end cap, or some of them might be less valuable based on where consumer sentiment is going on some of these brands. So from a CPG standpoint, there's going to be very large ramifications once this scales up to a more predictive model. I think there's certain brands that really rely on being the first movers. Like if you look at certain health food retailers out there, right? Like their customers want to have the latest and greatest. So that might come from more of a brand radar that gets powered by what's the stores seeing, the dwell time with consumers. So they're going to move faster to new brands, and this is a good way to test out new brands too, because you can actually use this as part of the inputs for the pilot that they might have for selling in the store. The larger CPGs, I don't know. It might be interesting to see how that works out. It could be good or bad. It just depends on how consumer sentiment is going to be coming from the data itself versus more of the spreadsheets and the gut feel of merchants today.
So maybe the next kind of topic that comes to mind is, where does privacy sit in all of this? And how do you build? So there's this pilot that you mentioned, Arnon, where the employee's perception was that this was meant to be a low trust tool for the employees, yeah, which in fact could be reversed, right? It could be a positive asset for them. How do you deal, what's the considerations now with the consumers who are going through those areas? I mean, it's kind of ubiquitous everywhere, but how do you walk the line between what's good on privacy or not? And this is it's a big topic, but any initial thoughts, how do you walk the privacy aspect in all of this?
Yeah, so I think just touching this, and this is, I think, one of those areas that, it's an area that, again, pilots survive privacy easily because I do it in my lab. Who cares? It's fine. But then rollouts don't. I think just from companies that I've been following and helping, we see in the beginning it was really the wild west. And today, especially in some regions, Europe and others, there's more strict rules in terms of what you can or can't capture on camera and which types of camera, whether it's obviously face recognition and even tattoos. And I think it's great that the regulator is now catering to this, or starting to understand the space and figure out what is going to be allowed and what's not going to be allowed. We saw, again, as I mentioned, that in that specific pilot, which was in a few stores in Latin America, again, it wasn't just the customers started to feel watched. It was the employees felt like the system is there to catch them doing something wrong. And again, they got the training before. They were told how everything is legal and compliant, and we're not taking their pictures. Everything was out in the open, and still there was a lot of angst from the employees of why do they need this in the store. So I think for retailers who want to scale this successfully, you have to treat privacy as part of the product experience. And again, putting the regulator and its requirements aside, just in terms of your people, your employees in the stores, and obviously your customers, it has to be clear what the system does and what it doesn't. And trust is just another product experience or feature, if you want to call it that I think you have to address when you start. Otherwise, this whole thing is going to explode.
Yeah, adding that trust layer on top of it, again, I think is really important. I think from both sides of it, from the customers and the associates in the store. If you're feeling surveilled, you're probably lost the plot a bit with computer vision. If it quietly keeps shelves full, you got shorter queues, it's easy to check out. The associates become free to help. I think you've won. So you're sort of winning hearts and minds a little bit. You still get into the creepiness factors when you're actually looking about the real theft side of it, or you're surveilling from a workflow and productivity standpoint. So those will be trade-offs that you'll have to consider very closely as this matures. And I think, I think you're going to have to start somewhere. You got cameras on all the time. It's difficult.
I mean, think about it. I mean, all of us here sitting in our office, and this just occurred to me. Think about us. What if somebody comes in tomorrow and tells us, you continue to do whatever you're doing, it's all great. I'm just going to put a little camera here to take our pictures all day and see what you're doing. That doesn't sound right. It doesn't feel like somebody's trusting me. And obviously, retail store is a different environment. There's shelves, there's inventory. But I think, sometimes people, that's what, goes on in their mind is, this is here to watch me and see that I'm doing my job. It goes back to trust. So I think training is a big part of it. You can have a incredible technology, the latest hardware and AI agents and whatever it is, and it's going to fail if the people in the store lose trust in why you're doing this. And I think it's much more than just a technology installation and challenge. It's really a behavioral challenge as well.
Yeah, it was a super important point. And I think what you said about, essentially there's privacy by design, there's understanding, what is the perceived intrusion when you're using these systems, on both sides of the camera, and knowing how that affects behavior. It sounds exciting. I mean, there's a lot of, it's an exciting time. And coming to the tinkering subject, I think there was a study that said something like 68% of retailers are piloting for implementing computer vision. And then another study that says, but only 4% are using it in production. So does that directionally feel correct? And if so, why is there such a gap in that?
Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder how they define that, actually.
Yeah.
Right? Like, everybody's got cameras in stores, right? So that's a form. Whether you're doing computer vision or not, you've got some level of it already started.
For sure.
Whether that's nascent or not. I think a lot of it is used from a loss prevention standpoint. That's where we have a lot of conversations, and that probably is the natural starting point. But once we actually start to see cases where it's driving real, and we are. I mean, we're seeing. Walmart's drive. I don't know if they're putting shelf cameras in, like specifically with. I actually forget. It's electronic shelf labels, but sometimes it's in conjunction with shelf cameras. So you're starting to see that a little bit more happening. But once you actually start to see the growth cases drive actual, net profit at the end of the day, free cash flow, this is going to be a FOMO situation. And it's going to be required to have computer vision unless there's some sort of other IoT or, other way of doing it, like LiDAR or something. I'm not sure, but computer vision seems a natural choice to get to where the future of stores and operating stores are going, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, we talked about this before, right? I mean, at the end of the day, it's not just about installing a piece of hardware. It's how do you build the right, let's call it data pipeline that doesn't break every time the business, which is the store, changes. And again, retail stores change all the time. How do you build a model that doesn't break every time something changes in the store? And I really think this is where, having a strong engineering partner really matters, because it's not just about, hey, what AI agent magic, and let's throw in some more buzzwords I can throw in there. It's really, how do I build a disciplined, structured execution machine over time that, again, takes that data, whatever happens in the store, and ties it to what is the action I'm doing with it. And I think this is what people realize after they do a pilot. I agree with Joe. The 4% number to me sounds surprisingly low. And again, every retail store I can think of today has computer vision. The only question is, what do they actually do with it?
Right.
I don't know how they counted those numbers.
Right. And they probably run into a lot of roadblocks too, as we talked about before. Like you said, Arnon, like it's really, it's easy to see it in a conference setting where everything's working. It's going to work at 99% of the time. You start adding shadows or reflection off the Red Bull, refrigerator. Like it's gonna throw things off a bit. And there's some traps as it relates to pilots, right? There's proofs of concepts sometimes drag on. They're disconnected, or they're stripped of the context that makes it useful sometimes. I've run into that leading innovation at big companies before, inside big retailers. You've got the silo syndrome, which still exists at retailers, and everybody's been talking about trying to break that out of that for decades and decades. Everybody owns their own silo and the KPIs within that silo that are sometimes optimizing just for your silo and not other silos, or the organization silo. Those silos still need to break down within retail. I think some retailers are doing a better job of breaking those down. The others, and then you have like this edge reality check. What kind of store infrastructure do you have? Is it weak? Do you have bandwidth issues? Do you have a compute choke on AI before it can deliver actual value? So there's just pieces of the puzzle that need to get built in. I think that's why I like looking at the autonomous driving vehicles. I mean, those were supposed to be already, what percent, I don't know, a larger percentage of penetration into all vehicles than they are today already. But they're running into all those issues too, and they're working through them. So again, I think it's inevitable. It's just a matter of like, again, retailers don't have a lot of margin. So where do you start? What's the best place to start with the margins? Shrink its inventory accuracy, make those work first, and then you're going to get some adoption, and you're going to start seeing a lot more adoption for computer vision.
Yeah, great points. So just kind of a final question to each of you, which is, what do you see in terms of where will retail be when someone really fully embraces computer vision? What does that look like for that business, and how they look at their customers and their strategy and their operations? Joe?
Well, I'm always a futuristic view. I mean, autonomous driving stores is probably the top of the hierarchy of needs, right? You're going to be able to do autonomous replenishment. You're going to know exactly what products you should have on each shelf down to a specific store. You're going to have predictive allocations from your merchandising AI agent, if that exists in the future. You're going to have end-to-end store, profit maximization. You're going to tie it in with your omni-channel pieces of the puzzle too, whether it's a loyalty app itself. There's all sorts of pieces of the landscape that this hits on, from store operations to retail media to shopper insights. And those are all just going to be ultimately orchestrated and have actions happening really close to real time. So I think it's going to really eke out the profit maximization, the margins more and more and more as this matures. And I think it's going to be obviously computer vision is going to be a big role in it. I just think it's underplayed now as to what role it's going to play, but computer vision is going to play a very big role in this action layer at the store.
Great.
Yeah, maybe just to pick up on that and kind of continue with the autonomous driving analogy. I think when you step back, to me anyway, I think it's clear that computer vision isn't really a technology challenge. And I'm not underestimating the technology advancements and all the effort and resources and money put into these companies. But for me, it's really, and again, I know I'm repeating this like a broken record, but I think this is really what we have to hammer home. This is more of an operational challenge than anything else. If, the retailers who win or will win, I think, are the ones that we'll get alignment from top executives to store ops, store operations, to the frontline teams around really what are the clear outcomes that they want. And then they will set out to build a system that actually support these outcomes in real time, not as a pilot, not in a lab, but actually in the stores. And I think that's why, these partnerships matter so much in this space. It's not just about dropping a new model or a new technology in the store and walking away and hoping it's going to do its magic. The same way that with, autonomous driving cars, it's not going to happen that way. It's really about working with teams who understand both retail operations and its complexity, and also complex, technology and technical systems on the cutting edge, and obviously teams that are, in it for the long haul and don't see it as a project for a month or a quarter or a year and then walk away. And I think when you treat computer vision that way, is really as an integral, critical part of how the business is run, and not just a piece of tech that today it's cool to use and tomorrow maybe we'll use something else, I think then it stops being a pilot and starts becoming really a competitive advantage.
Yeah, it's amazing comments from both Arnon and Joe here today. So just to kind of wrap up some key themes in here, it sounds like incorporating computer vision in retail is table stakes today, and there's no other kind of alternative to that at the moment, because the impact that you can gain from it is so relevant to the bottom line that it'll be a competitive disadvantage if you're not considering it and if you're not implementing and trying out ways to improve the retail model. What I would say then is elements about there's different maturity models of where you are, but the bottom line is that you start in a certain part C where you can improve the part of the business, and then from there you can make it really part of the operations itself. So I'd like to say thank you to both Joe and Arnon for some great insights. The big takeaway is that computer vision retail is not just about the technology. It's about making it work in real operations. And to learn more about how HTEC helps retailers turn this into measurable impact, feel free to reach out. And if you enjoyed this session, subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow HTEC on LinkedIn, and stay tuned for the next episode of HTEC Today. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.